This is the PowerApps Podcast from CRM Audio, what you need to know about Microsoft Power Apps and Flow, with those dynamic guys and Shawn the CRM Hobbit Tabor. This episode is brought to you by Dynamics 365 User Group. D365 UG is the world's most influential user group community of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM users and partners. Across the globe, members share a common goal of maximizing and advancing the performance of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM so that individuals and companies can improve operations, overcome obstacles, and exceed goals. We thank D365 UG for sponsoring the PowerApps Podcast from CRM Audio.
Welcome to another episode of the PowerApps Podcast, the podcast on the CRM Audio Network that talks all about Power Apps, Flow, and the technologies that support them. As always, I am your host, Shawn Tabor, and with us today, two of the three those Dynamics guys, Mr. Kyle Hill and Runaway Train himself, Will Dorrington. Hey. How you doing, gentlemen?
Hey there.
Hello.
So quite a active couple weeks since we last talked over at those Dynamics guys. You got started a community program where you're starting to get quite a few community leaders signed up, and there's been a lot of action on the PowerApps Bank. So why don't we kick off before we go to our special guest with some updates there and let everybody know what's going on with those Dynamics guys.
Great. So there's been quite a few things going on at the moment. The PowerApps Bank has been buzzing like a strong hive with activity, especially on the gamification front. It seems there's been a lot of games being added to that. And another thing that Carl, Chris, and myself have launched is this concept of community leaders. So these are members of the those Dynamics guys Microsoft Product Stack community that go above and beyond with their contributions and collaborations with the community itself. So these are people who post about the hot topics that really push out Power Apps towards the bank, but not only actually upload, but then take time to discuss with people that may reach out to them about how they created the Power App, how they can get involved as well, and will actually spend time helping out. So these get awarded this community leader status, and with that comes certain benefits, which I won't go into right now. It's a relatively long list.
And I think it's true to say, sorry, Shawn, that
No, go ahead, Kyle.
That it's actually quite interesting to see, the number of different regions where we're getting these community leaders coming out of. So, I mean, at the moment, Will, do you know the count offhand?
There's just under 15, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, those are spread globally throughout places like Ireland, Australia, Singapore, Finland, got some in India, England, and a couple more regions coming soon. So it's really great to see sort of engagement from the community, globally and sharing different perspectives and, all contributing back to the same place.
And it's very grassroots, which is cool. And that generally leads to a much stronger community as well. So because everybody's engaged, so that's very cool. And you were up to 60 downloads or 60 uploads of Power Apps to the bank. Is that right, Will?
That was 60 downloads in one day.
Whoa.
Yeah,
I read that wrong. That's great.
So there was a bit of a peak. Especially because it was during a day where a lot actually happened. So we had a couple of games uploaded by people like E, who's awesome. You should follow her on LinkedIn. And some of the hackathon stuff like David Reed's PowerPoint presentation on CDS. So yeah, it gave a bit of a spike, which was really cool to see.
Very cool. Well, we're going to put some of that in the show notes so you can get links to the site if you want to be a community leader. You can participate there. We'll also put a link to the PowerApps Bank and some shout outs to some of the contributors that we want to feature and put a spotlight on. Maybe that'll be, maybe that'll be a new segment in future episodes, a community leader spotlight. So we'll take a look at that.
Love it.
But you know what? This is kind of a big deal because it's been hyped. This is the first episode we've had hyped, which I thought was kind of cool. We have a very special guest, so special that we had to have Chris stay home. And that is none other than program manager from Microsoft, the one and only 8-bit classroom, Mr. Brian Dang. How you doing, Brian?
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's my honor to be here on this podcast. I've been listening to the previous episodes where you guys have a lot of fun talking about and geeking about PowerApps, which is not something that happens all the time everywhere. I really enjoy the topics that you guys bring up on here. Like just on the last episode, I got a good overview of the release notes from you guys. Points that it didn't really make sense to me. So it's good to hear it from you guys putting into words that are human readable.
Did you get the most from Chris? I mean, he shared an unbelievable amount last time.
Oh, he was the most thorough.
No, we get that. We got a lot of feedback around that.
Oh, that was so fun. Well, and I have to say, this podcast is definitely different than a lot of the others on the network because it is a lot of fun, and we try to infuse some fun into the content that we're talking about because it is important to, at least I think, and Kyle, will you let me know if you agree? I think it's important to stress that while there's a lot of really cool, innovative stuff out there for business solutions, it can also be very fun to implement and to work with, right?
I
think that's what we
disagree
tried
with
to do. Okay, good, excellent. Smart aleck.
Shawn, I think that's a really cool point because Will was mentioning earlier a lot about all the games that are being uploaded to the PowerApps Bank, and basically what's happening is we've got a traditionally business-focused platform being used to generate games, but they're actually just gamifying common concepts. So you can see the community enjoying a podcast with a bit of light banter, using a platform to generate some gamification, and I think quite soon you'll see that translating into actual business scenarios where that gamification is baked in, and that's a little hint into maybe Brian, maybe Will, Rory's out there. Put some sort of leaderboard or something along those lines and start demonstrating the power of the platform with this gamification baked in.
Yeah, when I was making my first set of apps, it was really trying to create some games for my students. And in making those things like this app for multiplication, I was actually learning a lot when I'm trying to make games. And like a few weeks ago when I was making this Space Invaders game that I eventually put on the website, people were coming to me afterwards, sending me IMs, DMs, and saying, "Brian, I watched that video that you had live streamed about making Space Invaders, and I learned how to make this gallery that I've been always wanting to do. And it's not about," and they weren't making like a game of their own; they were making a business application. So there's a lot of concepts that you get from making some of these games on PowerApps.
No, I could not agree with you more. I actually would argue that creating games, especially if you haven't checked out the Space Invader game by Brian, then you should jump on to the PowerApps Bank and download that 'cause it's amazing. But making some of these games are actually more complex than creating creating business apps. So you learn a lot from that, from the controls all the way down to, as you said, the gallery interactions, etc. You're spot on.
Well, and I think
Roy,
don't you think it loosens up the angst or the anxiety in creating these things because you're doing something that's fun, but then you just take those concepts to a business app and it makes it even better and more fluid, I think.
Yeah, it goes to show that you can have a lot of fun when you're building these apps. What I like most about PowerApps is it's the learning that you do that makes it enjoyable. So you might be learning about how to create maybe you're trying to use some of these variables, and when you finally unlock and your understanding of variables, you feel good about yourself. It's a good learning experience.
Brian, you mentioned earlier that you were a teacher, and the reason I bring this up is there's been quite a lot of chat in the community as to how to get started with PowerApps, maybe in its most basic form, and grow from there. So maybe you want to share with us your story, how you got involved with PowerApps?
Sure. I actually have a long history with PowerApps before it was actually known as PowerApps. Did any of you guys start on Project Sienna? That was the precursor to it.
Well, I think you were an expert, weren't you?
Sure, if that's the same as Chris is an expert in the release notes, and absolutely, yeah. I knew of Project Sienna, I knew of the history, but no, I never touched it. But cheers, Carl.
Maybe a bit of a history lesson for us then, Brian.
Sure. Project Sienna was one of these early Windows 8 apps that had come out, and there were some videos of this app in Windows 8 where you could make your own app. I had learned about it from Channel 9, which is it's a website on Microsoft where you could see some of the videos. They had demoed how you can make this app for picking out items from a store, AdventureWorks. And I thought, you know what, I could apply some of these ideas to my own classroom. Like I could make an app for checking out books in my library. I wasn't able to do it at that time, but just the whole idea that I could do that. And at the time when I had discovered Project Sienna, it was when I was just becoming a teacher. I had picked up a long-term substitute position, and I had dabbled a little bit with Project Sienna, creating some galleries, trying to make some of these little apps. And what I found is I just wasn't a developer at the time, so there was a larger learning curve. So I found that it wasn't the right time for me to be playing with it. But because I was a teacher, there's this giant block of time called summer break where I had time to experiment with this. I don't know if you guys have how you guys spend your summers. Is it all fun and games for you, or do you not have a summer break?
We float your economy, I think. No, I'm only joking.
Wow. And I'm typically preparing for the following school year with my wife and daughter who are teachers. So I'm cutting out shapes, drawing things, laminating. It's like I have like a small Kinko's in my loft. So yeah, that's my.
So you have like your own paper cutter.
Yes. We actually have two. We have 4 printers, 2 laminators. The whole schmear. It's
got
a
it
thing.
all figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So figuring out a few years later, about 2 years later, when PowerApps came along, it made things a lot easier for me. For instance, like I was trying to make a grid, a 10 by 10 grid for multiplication. That just wasn't possible in Project Sienna. So when PowerApps came out, I was able to unlock that with, it's called the wrap count property. Oh, that was a game changer for me. It seems like a little thing. But my knowledge, even though I wasn't a programmer, I had a lot of Excel knowledge. So I would make a lot of solutions in Microsoft Excel. So I made a grade book that was better than the online grade books that we had. I could show more information in my own grade book than parents would normally see when they logged in to see their grades. And the reason why I made my own is there's a lot of little information like how exactly did they do in this particular instance of math, right? How are they doing day to day? It's called formative assessment. I wanted to show that so that when report card time comes around, it's not a surprise what grades a parent's expecting, right? They've already seen it as they go along. And I would make other solutions in Excel, like a plan book, digitizing it, so that I could share it with my substitute when they come in. I pretty much automated my subplans with my Excel spreadsheet. I don't know if you guys use the linking feature between Excel and Word. So creating solutions didn't really come new to me. It was a matter of finding the right tool to do the right job. But I don't know about you guys, but one of the things that I hit in Microsoft Excel are those macros, those scary macros. Have you guys seen that warning about there might be macros inside this document?
Yeah.
And you might want to check your security on that.
Yeah, back in the day when I was in financial services, quite often we would have to enable scads of macros within Excel spreadsheets in order to receive data from different applications dealing with market data. And it was always a demand from a financial advisor, but it always made info security insanely intense in terms of, okay, is this secure? Is this not secure? Is this going to cause something crazy? So, yeah, macros.
Yeah, and macros, they allow you to achieve a lot of things. They only catches those warnings. So when I would make some of these solutions and I would attempt to share it with other teachers, and they get this scary warning, it's not a friendly experience. So I needed to find something that would be something that I can share with one of my colleagues in the same grade level, and they'd want to use it, right? Make it that easy. So one of the first apps that I had made that I ended up sharing with one of my other teachers was this banking app. The whole idea is throughout the day you want to encourage certain things. You want to encourage and give students a feeling of progress. You know, did they improve in something? Did they improve in their multiplication facts? Did they improve in their reading ability? The way that they treat others? Are you encouraging the things that you want to encourage in your classroom?
Sounds like Chris needs that.
Yeah, some positive reinforcement for Chris there.
He needs it.
Yep, he's picked up a lot of those release notes.
Exactly.
So, Brian, you're a great example of where you had a lot of Excel skills, and then this new platform became available. You know, Sienna wasn't cutting the mustard, and you then had this platform available to you, and you were able to translate those skills almost seamlessly and start delivering these Power Apps, you know, to your colleagues and seeing some real results out of that.
Now, my learning timeline is a little bit different than most people might have. I had a day job, so during the day, obviously, I would be teaching, and when I got off from work, you know, I do my grading, and I need a break from grading. I need a break from those teacher tasks, you know, planning the next day's lesson, the next week's lesson, and that's where Power Apps came in. It was my playtime. So how I transferred my knowledge is, you know, there's so much in common between Power Apps and Excel. Something like if statements. When I figured out if statements in Excel, the if statements in Power Apps, it's not that different. And not only can you use if in Power Apps, you know, for like showing text, conditional formatting. If it's one thing, show one color. If it's another thing, show another color. In Power Apps, you know, you've seen the if statement. It's got that improvement where you could just lay things in a series. You don't need to nest ifs. So I was able to carry over some of my Excel knowledge and benefit from the improvements that Excel had that Power Apps had over Excel. You know, and I was able to perform some actions that, you know, I just couldn't do in Excel. Buttons are much easier.
Brian, I also think actually, aside from, you know, how easy it is to transfer that knowledge from Excel into Power Apps, you're also a really good example of people using Power Apps and its power, excuse the pun, outside of Dynamics 365. So where you've used it for teaching, as you've been on your journey with Microsoft, where else have you seen it used?
where else besides like
teaching
school
and Dynamics
teaching.
365? I think it's good for our
Dynamics
listeners to hear the other applications.
For my usage, or is that what you're asking?
Or just in general, where have you seen since you've been inside Microsoft? Since you've been working with the community.
Yeah. So I want to give a shout out to some of the other folks in the UK that I met just recently. Samit, who was previously an airport security guard at Heathrow. He's using these apps for translations, things that he would normally do with a book in his hand, and he's able to do it with his mobile device. Keith Watling from Arriva, one of the bus companies in the area, he uses these apps, or he uses PowerApps to improve the processes at his company. And what I love about Keith is he's thinking beyond just Arriva. He's imagining scenarios where PowerApps, you can make a Power App for anybody in the company. You can make PowerApps for just 3 people. You could make PowerApps for such a specific scenario that normally wouldn't be solved before. I like where he's thinking like that.
Brian, we'll mention that you're at Microsoft now. So obviously that means, well, it sounds like you've left your teaching days behind formally. How did the move to Microsoft come about? I mean, did you have a passion for doing PowerApps, or you were just breaking the time from doing your teacher's duties, and now you've ended up at Microsoft?
Yeah, as a teacher, I had started to see the impact of the apps I was making. So one of the apps that I had made for math, it's simply just analyzing geometric shapes, finding out the number of sides that are equal, the different angles that are the same. And my students did very well in identifying those quadrilaterals and triangles. And then other apps that I had made, like revealing how are mixed numbers and fractions related. I made a visual inside PowerApps for that. And when I started seeing the impact my students performing in those areas of math, I started to see the promise of PowerApps for my classroom. So I thought, you know what, if I don't have enough time throughout the day to make every single app that I wanted, what if I took off a year, made every single app that I got, that I've been dreaming of, that other teachers have been dreaming of, make every single app, and then come back to the classroom, have these superpowers, have these power apps at hand to teach everything the way I've been wanting to teach, and then come back to the classroom. I think that would have been powerful. So I took a year off, took a professional leave of absence to do all that. I had saved up enough money to be able to do that. Along the way, taking a big risk like that, I had a lot of comfort, though. My teaching position was secured. If I wanted to come back, I could come back to the same classroom, to the same grade level. It was very, very comfortable. But at the same time, within the first 2 weeks of leaving the classroom, that was June, I had made a lot of progress in making these apps, but I started to feel some doubts. Like, is this actually going to work out? Is this for real? Can I really do this? So it wasn't that easy. It required a feeling of. It required me to be motivated to really make this happen. And I was lucky because people along the way were showing me that they were benefiting from the answers that I was able to give them on forums and stuff. And so I kept going. And by January of 2018, I had started preparing for a conference where I was going to be sharing some of my apps. So I reached out to the folks on Microsoft through Twitter and said, hey, could you guys send me some promo items so I could give out at these events? And sure enough, they sent me a whole box of things. So thanks to Audrey and and everybody at Microsoft who shipped me this box of goodies. And we kept in touch after that. We had known each other for a while from my activity on the forums. And so they invited me to meet James Phillips to talk about my apps. So they scheduled a 15-minute meeting. I don't know about you guys, but 15-minute meetings, are those a thing? I never believed them. They're like unicorns out in the wild.
That they are indeed.
People with short attention spans, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was invited to this, and it was a Skype call. And I was sharing all of these spelling apps, these math apps that I had made. I was talking about the research that was behind them and why, as a teacher, it was, and having the knowledge of a teacher, I was able to make these things the way that I had been wanting to. In the middle of it, in the middle of this 15-minute meeting, James asks me, "Hey, Brian, how would you feel about meeting Bill Gates? I'm meeting him in 2 weeks." Which was a jaw-dropping moment for me because there's only one answer to that question. Yes, I would love to meet Bill Gates. So
if you turned
now,
around and said no,
the problem.
Absolutely, I'm busy that day. I've got a haircut. I'm really sorry. We'll have to reschedule.
I'm working with some students that day. It's more important. I got my priorities. The problem is that wasn't the end of the meeting. I had to continue and show a few more things, like my solitaire app that I had made, and some of the animations that I had done in PowerApps, which nobody's expecting this. And then at the end of this 15-minute meeting, James asks me, "Brian, how would you feel about working for Microsoft?" To which, if he didn't ask me about meeting Bill Gates earlier, I would have been in a little bit more disbelief, but I had to ask, "Are you kidding?" People like James Phillips don't kid. That's what I've learned. So
crazy.
yeah, this was unbelievable. I had to tell my brother, my brothers, my sisters, my parents, and they were in disbelief. They were wondering, "Are you going to move? Are you going to move to Washington?" Because I'm from California, sunny California. Making the move would have been was a drastic change, not only in terms of the kinds of work that I would be doing, but just the scenery. Well, Seattle and Bellevue and Washington look very different than California. There are beaches in California.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same kind of weather up here.
Man, I'm so excited to hear about your Bill Gates meeting. You've dropped that to us now, and I'm waiting for it. So come on, tell us about it.
Well, you're not the only ones who had to wait. I had this. I was scheduled to show like a presentation to Bill Gates about PowerApps and how they could be used in education. And I had to wait outside this room where everybody was meeting for 2 hours before I was brought in. 2 hours, knowing that I would be meeting the most influential person in the world and in education. And normally I'm standing in front of children all day, and I don't get the jitters. I've stood in front of 1,000 students. I've stood in front of hundreds of people in several times. So I normally don't get anxiety meeting people, but being outside that room and knowing who I would be meeting, I was pacing back and forth and practicing what I would say, even though it was just going to be a short presentation. And so I was drinking water at the time, though, because I didn't want to be parched. I hate having dry mouth. I don't know if you guys have it on this podcast. I always have a drink of water by hand. So I actually had to run to the restroom a few times. And I was afraid that when I was in the restroom, they would call me in and I wouldn't be there. And they would cancel the whole thing. That was going through my mind. But they finally brought me in. And I was sharing, I got all my words down right. I was very pleased. I wasn't afraid as much as I thought I would be. And Bill Gates is a very good listener. He was watching very intently everything that I was sharing about the apps. He'd ask questions. He'd take notes. He'd nod along. So I was getting very good vibes from him and everybody in the room about things. So yeah. I mean, getting the affirmation that what I was doing was valuable, and hearing it from Bill Gates was, that was very, very important to me. Getting that validation.
When you're talking to him about PowerApps with education, what is he thinking? What is he? I mean, is he extrapolating other? I'm just wondering how he kind of thinks. You know what I mean? I mean, is he immediately taking it to the next level? Is he, kind of doing devil's advocate talk to where he's, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? To see how you react to that, or how did that conversation go?
He was very pleased at the level of pedagogy is how it's described. Mm-hmm. The level of developer knowledge that I was sharing, and the level of pedagogical knowledge. He was very pleased to see that come together, and that PowerApps was able to do that. I don't know if I could go through. I probably can't go into too much detail about that meeting.
Sure. No.
But yeah. A lot of happy vibes coming from it. So,
I think I would just freeze with intimidation, because, I would always think he's thinking 3 steps ahead of me or 4 steps ahead of me. So
like a grandmaster.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Like he's got everything figured out.
And it wouldn't be dry mouth. My mouth would just fall out, I think.
Yeah. Oh, geez. That's awesome. That's awesome. But, one of the things, having lived with teachers for the better part of my existence, mm-hmm. How did you get them to accept something new within their day-to-day, progress? Because I know my wife, she'll move with like technology at a glacier pace, right? It's not something that she can turn on a dime and say, okay, I'm going to start using technology, or something that's different in my day-to-day. How did you help get that value proposition across to the other educators?
So by chance, I had joined a new school when after a summer where I had been building a lot of PowerApps. So I had a summer's worth of time to make some highly developed PowerApps, and I was able to demonstrate it to some new teachers that I was working with. And they were very open-minded about trying it out. They had been trying to replace a paper process this whole time. They had been feeling a lot of frustration with students like pulling out this it's like a bank ledger of their own, a balance book. That's what they called them. So they would lose some time throughout the day when students pull out this balance book to fill in some new amounts of money that they're adding to their accounts that they're spending. So seeing me demonstrate it and showing the kind of value that it would bring, they were immediately sold on it. They wanted to try it out, and throughout the year, they started seeing ways that it brought back time into the classroom. So now they're able to spend like more time on the auctions that they would do in their classrooms with the student bank accounts. They would see the students feel senses of progress. They would feel like engaged in the lessons as they worked with these tools. Adoption is always a thing inside companies, not just what I've learned coming to Microsoft is teachers are not the only ones who have concerns with adopting new things, right? It's companies around the world, different industries who also have these issues. And what I always tell people when they're trying to show something is just go out there and make it first, demonstrate it for yourself, and then demonstrate it for others afterwards. Show the impact for yourself first. Take that initial risk so that you have a story to tell. So I was lucky that I was able to show some of the ways that I had been using my apps for my own classroom so that I can show that proof of concept to others before they adopted it.
Well, and now with other Microsoft technologies opening up for educators, like let's say, for example, Forms. Forms is a very, very, very easy thing that you can just immediately walk into and use. Any teacher could do that because it's creating either a survey or some kind of prompt and response kind of mechanism, right? How can you, for a teacher or someone in the education space, how could you compare the ramp up to something like Forms to something like a simple Canvas app?
So yeah, while you can make what I would suggest for anybody is use the right tool for the right job. So if Microsoft Forms solves issues, solves your problem, or it's the right solution for you, go with that for certain things. And then use PowerApps for the things that could not be solved in any other way. I think of PowerApps as that custom solution, like that can solve these little things throughout the day that you have to do. So, like for me, when I'm thinking of PowerApps that would solve issues for teachers, I'm thinking of those little management things. Differentiation. What is that? It's a whole set of actions that you have to do to prepare a lesson, to find out where students are, how you're going to group them, how you're going to shape your lesson. So I made apps for gathering feedback, gathering information on students, formative assessment, and then making those, taking that same data and acting upon it, analyzing it in that moment. So PowerApps is better for those really customized solutions than just creating a form, in the world of education at least. Teachers, they don't have time for everything. So I would say use PowerApps for the things that it should be used for, and then use Forms for the things that it should be used for. Use Sway for the things it should be used for. Use OneNote for the right solutions. Yeah, I love PowerApps, but I'm not use it for every single little thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you said you worked on a app for multiplication table, right? Mm-hmm. Were you using, and this is just personal curiosity because I'm dealing with this with my daughter now, were you able to do it with the quote unquote new way to do your times tables, or the old way that I think we've all learned?
Great question. So when I'm creating this table, the whole idea behind this 10 by 10 grid is to show the strategies for multiplying. Show the strategies for learning a fact. So if you're trying to learn your fives facts, I had grown up getting really good at counting, and counting very fast. And so when I was figuring out a fact like 5 times 7, I would just count 5, 10, 15, 20, all the way up to 35. And I would get really good at it. But with this multiplication grid that I was building, it would flash a strategy on it to show, 5 times 7 is really just 5 times 5 and 2 more groups of 5. So I would take an existing fact that I knew and I would build on it. And so the more ways that I look at 5 times 7, it's not just 5 times 7, it's not just 5 times 5 plus 5 times 2. It's a lot of different ways that I can get to it. The more ways that I know to get to it, the stronger my memory is to it. So if you're asking, like, is it the new way? I would say it's, I wouldn't qualify new versus old. I would qualify one as more efficient and one as less efficient. So I'm thinking more in terms of that way.
So more strategic, less memorization.
More strategic. Yeah, it is memorization, just better methods to memorize. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Excellent.
Brian, I have a question off the back of everything we've discussed now. So I'm unsure if you can answer this due to your position in Microsoft, meaning that you are going to be privy to more knowledge than us mere mortals. But I'm going to ask it anyway because that's kind of what I do.
Sure.
So where do you see the future of the Power Platform in the way of sort of new functionality, controls, etc.? Where do you see it heading, and what sort of things do you think will be coming in?
I could share with you like some of the things that are on the roadmap that I am most excited about. Some of these that you guys already talked about on the last podcast. Responsive design. Holy moly. I have been asking for some of the features that are on the roadmap for the longest time as a customer. So I am excited to see some of these things come out. So let me just share just a little bit about it. Some of the impacts that you'll have as a maker of PowerApps is you'll be able to make a PowerApps in one size and put in the logic so that it resizes and moves the way that you want it to. And that'll save you a lot of time, so you don't have to make a mobile app, you don't have to make a tablet app, and just choose one between them. So that's a huge advantage that I'm going to have on my end. I like that a lot. Let's see. I think one of the biggest things going forward, not a feature from a feature perspective, but just from a humanity perspective, is what I see with PowerApps is it's going to open the door to make app making so casual. You'll just make an app to solve a little thing that you just discovered right on the spot. That's what I see going forward. People have been writing emails so casually nowadays. You're probably getting thousands of emails a day, right? And people are casually making websites nowadays. It's just a normal thing. You know, you go on Wix.com or whatever website of your choice, you can make it for free. Well, with PowerApps, you're just going to be making apps just casually. That's what I see going forward.
So it normalize
from that perspective.
It will normalize it.
Yeah.
It's that citizen developer point of view again, where, hey, anyone can do this. Look, I can create a website, I can all ping emails, and I can also create an app if I need to.
Yeah, for every little thing that you want. Because you know what? Who's going to make it for you? Nobody. Nobody's going to make the exact app that you want. And nobody knows your specific needs. And even if they do, they might not make it exactly the way that you want it. So that's where I see things going. You're going to make it yourself.
So that's a great segue then into the App in a Day Roadshow that's currently being facilitated by Microsoft. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. There's a rumor that based on the success of those Dynamics Guys hackathon, that this inspired this event. Not sure how true that is, but maybe you can just share a little bit about what's happening here and how customers can actually get involved in these events and like you say, start making the apps that they need. In conjunction, you shared your stories of how you were able to do it to aid your situation, and now we're opening that up to more and more people.
Mm-hmm. So we've had an App in a Day roadshow in the past, and that first set of dates had completed, but now we have a new set of dates with new App in a Days pretty much around the world, where people can join. They can see these dates. I don't have the link on hand, but maybe you guys can share it. So they can come to these app-in-a-days, build an app, a Canvas app, connect it to some data, connect it to a flow, all in one day. And they could even show that app, show it off on their mobile device and say, hey, I made an app. And afterwards, where they take it is up to them. I've even heard that somebody had taken the exact scenario that you worked through in App-in-a-Day, and they actually used that in their own day-to-day business dealings. So it's great.
Yeah, and I mean, just having a look at the list, they're all upcoming fairly soon. So we'll include the link.
September and October. Yeah,
and I mean primarily out of the UK, US, Denmark, and Australia. But I'm sure there's going to be more coming that span the rest of the globe.
Definitely, and there's a lot of places to learn besides the App-in-a-Day. Like there's the forums. There's the formula reference, which I've written a blog post about how important that formula reference page is to learn some of the formulas that are available in PowerApps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we recently had our virtual service summer camp and had probably the most well-attended sessions were PowerApps related. And that kind of begged the question of whether or not we have a virtual day camp for PowerApps. And I would think to support some of the App-in-a-Day stuff, maybe do some things like your blog article where you talked about the collapsing menus and how to manage those kind of UI, go more detailed into specific sections and things like that. So the thing I love about PowerApps and Flow where we're at right now, you can scratch the surface and go through an entire day's worth of content, or you can go deep dive on very specific things to really understand how to maximize the benefit out of it. So it's just a gold mine for things to learn and things to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could always add on additional challenges for yourself too. We'll be delivering the App-in-a-Day at Microsoft Ignite as well. These challenges make PowerApps interesting.
So will you be at Ignite?
I will be at Microsoft Ignite this upcoming September.
Very good. Kyle and Will, are you going to be able to go to Ignite or no? Is that on your schedule?
Not on mine currently.
I'm not allowed out of the actual office. Contract. I'm not even meant to be on here, so don't try and bleep out my name. That would be great.
Well, luckily for me, it's in driving distance to my home, so I'll be there. So we'll be actually CRM Audio is going to be recording in the podcast center during Ignite, so that's going to be very cool as well. So I think we're just about at our time. So Brian, if people wanted to get in touch with you, what is your preferred way for them to do so?
There's probably two ways. One would be Twitter. I'm on Twitter at 8-Bit Classroom. And that's, I didn't describe this earlier, but that's it comes from the name of the way that I've decorated my classroom. It's got a bunch of 8-bit art and Minecraft stuff on it.
Very cool. Very cool.
The other way would be the PowerApps Power Users Community Forum. And if they search for Mr.-Dang, I'm always on there helping out.
Very cool.
Those will be the two ways.
Very cool. We'll put links to that in the show notes as well. And this has been a lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future. But thanks a lot for joining us on the PowerApps Podcast, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Any last parting comments, Kyle and Will, before we go?
It's just been awesome. Like, seriously, it's been really nice listening in on your experience, Brian. And hopefully this will enthuse others listening to this to move forward with their PowerApps journey as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and just two other shout outs. One, obviously, to the PowerApps user group. get people involved in that. So we can include some links, as well as the PowerApps blog. I mean, a lot of the content that Brian's been talking about, there's some really good articles there, some updates that we haven't gone through today, but they are there if you want to be in the know.
And for those who are listening, if you haven't went out to the PowerApps Bank and uploaded some content, or if you just want to share your story on what you've done with PowerApps, how you dealt with it, successes, maybe not so much successes, please send either through email to voice@crm.audio, or send us a tweet. You could tweet me at CRM Hobbit. You could tweet Kyle at Kylo Hill, and you could tweet Will at William. Isn't it William Doherty?
Yeah, I couldn't fit my whole name in.
I couldn't fit
it. It was too awesome.
He can't spell. That's the real reason.
Yeah, that's really what it is. So we'll put those in the show notes. But we'd love to hear your experiences, and I'm sure Brian would as well. I mean,
and Chris, don't forget about Chris.
Yeah, no,
tattooed CRM guy.
He's really upset about today.
Actually, let's spam him, seeing as he didn't do much on the podcast today.
Yeah,
everything to Chris.
Yeah, if you send something to Chris, say, "Hey, I loved the comment you made about," and just whatever it is, he won't know. So that's very cool. But once again, Brian, thanks so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
And we'll talk to you guys next time on the PowerApps Podcast.
This has been the PowerApps Podcast from CRM Audio. Send us your feedback at mail@powerappspodcast.com. Check out other episodes from the CRM Audio Network by going to CRM Audio in your browser or searching for CRM Audio on Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, any place else that you can find podcasts. This is a production of Dynamics Podcast LLC.